Broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California, your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
Hey, here we go again. It is another edition of the Radio Free California Network, and I am your host, Tim Donnelly, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in California. GOP frontrunner Donald Trump just keeps on slugging away in everything he does. I was talking to a business owner today. Basically, he seems to be lapping the field. In Iowa, he is at 38% with Ted Cruz, surprising leap ahead, second place in the latest Iowa poll. And, you know, a lot of people have not taken Ted Cruz seriously, and just as they have not taken Donald Trump seriously. I don't know what to tell you, but with the numbers that we are seeing right now, you're going to get a nominee who is likely to come from one of these individuals. Now, admittedly, Ben Carson has slipped rather dramatically. He has dropped significantly in the polls, allowing Cruz to leap ahead, at least in Iowa. But in the national polls, there's one up at Fox News, the Fox News poll. You've got Trump at 28%. Now, and this is Republican primary voters, which really are the people who are going to vote in a Republican primary. Duh. He was at Trump has moved ahead 2 points since the last time they've done this poll at Fox News. Carson dropped from 23 to 18, and Cruz and Rubio picked up 3 points each at 14%. Jeb Bush is still in it somehow at 5%. Chris Christie, Carly Fiorina, Mike Huckabee each get 3%. Trump is doing two things that I find fascinating. One, he's taking on the GOP establishment. He has fired warning shots at Reince Priebus, saying that they had a deal and that the GOP elite, the elitists who run the party, are breaking the deal. I'd like to have 5 minutes with Donald Trump to just say, look, let me explain to you how this works. It doesn't matter what they say. Their word is worth nothing. They'll smile to your face. Meanwhile, they're envisioning either stabbing you in the back themselves or who they're going to get to stab you in the back so their fingerprints aren't on it. There is an organization that has been put together called Trump Card LLC, pulled together by a Republican GOP consultant named Liz Mayer. And the purpose of it is literally to destroy Donald Trump. And this is something you generally don't see Democrats doing, but you always see Republicans doing it. Whenever somebody gets ahead who they don't like, who they can't control, and clearly nobody can control Trump. He can't even control himself, but that makes him a target. And so you've got a guy who has actually been bringing people into the party. He's been bringing young people into the party, the so-called millennials who the Democrats have owned for a millennia. You've got Hispanics that are coming into the Republican Party because Donald Trump has had a conversation. He has started a conversation. Yeah, some of them are probably offended by some of the sentiments he expressed, but they gave him the benefit of the doubt. They listened to his qualifications and looked at his record. He's not a hater. He's not a racist. He's not a xenophobe. He's somebody who cares about America, and he's somebody who refuses to be cowed and silenced by political correctness. And you know what? I think it crosses all party lines. I've talked to a lot of black people who said, I'm voting for Donald Trump. And many of them I know were Democrats. Now, I don't know if they're still Democrats, but they're planning to vote for a man that the average GOP candidate, the Mitt Romney model, could never attract. See, Donald Trump feels our pain in the way Bill Clinton did, even though he expresses way too much. He never shuts up, and he needs to take a lesson and learn to maybe smile once in a while and be charming and not always have to be right and not always have to brag about how he's so smart and so successful. But contrast that with Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney with the perfect hair and the perfect teeth and the perfect wife and the perfect life. Who the hell can relate to that? Most of us are running around trying to keep, we're not trying to keep the train from going off the tracks. We're continually trying to derail the train that has derailed. Whether it's, issues with kids, especially teenagers, whether it's issues with their school or the possibility of them going to college and what are you going to do and can you afford it, family vacations, or maybe it's more pressing things like how are you going to pay the mortgage this month and keep a roof over your head, not buy Christmas presents. And you see someone like Mitt Romney, and he's got his own jet. He's worth billions of dollars. He's been 100 million times more successful than you'll ever dream of being. He's just one of those so-called perfect people. The only problem is you put him in front of a microphone and he's boring and he fails to inspire and he doesn't engage in the fight that is necessary. He will not stand and defend us because he doesn't even understand what the battle is about. As a matter of fact, he was on the side of Obamacare when he was supposed to be fighting Obama over Obamacare. So he had a real issue standing up for us because he stood against us. But most of the time, he was just boring. And when they called him out on the 47%, instead of speaking the hard truth, doing it in love, doing it with some compassion, but sticking to his guns and saying, hey, look, this sucks. 47% of the American people shouldn't be on government dependency. They shouldn't be living on the government plantation. They shouldn't be people that are kept outside and walled out, standing outside the window looking in at the American dream. They're people that should be invited in. And the only way we can do that is reform entitlements. The only way we're going to do that is be honest with ourselves that there's a certain segment of the American population that doesn't work anymore because they don't have to. Look, here's the problem though. We don't hate those people. We feel for them. I mean, I can't imagine he could actually do a Bill Clinton-like, I feel your pain. But he could try something. Show some emotion, Mitt. Show that you give a damn. Show that you're willing to take a risk. The way you risk things in business, even show up on the battlefield at all. That's Mitt Romney. So why the GOP has decided to go to war with Donald Trump, who could bring them an extraordinary, diverse coalition of people who are frustrated with the Democrat Party, who are frustrated with the Republican Party, and who want somebody that will speak the truth. They want somebody who will lead. It's not about Republican. It's not about Democrat. It's about finding a leader. And it's about finding a leader who is an American leader, someone who can articulate. We're going to have a video that has gone viral. We'll tell you more about it after this break, and we'll have it coming on up later on in the program. This video put out by a Colorado teenager has already had 7 million hits, and you will love what she says. 323-746-TALK is our number, and we will be right back. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back to the show. We're going to go straight to the phones, to your calls. We're going to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Frank. Hey, Frank, welcome to the show. It's interesting you would call because I'm taking a look at this poll that has changed everything in your state. You got Ted Cruz coming in second, Marco Rubio in third. Ben Carson has dropped out of the picture. What's going on there?
I've always liked Ted Cruz, and I told you last time I spoke to you, I like Trump. I just think he's going to talk his way out of it sooner or later. Like I said, we need a little stability. Obviously, we don't have any smarts in the White House, so hopefully we can get some civility back in there. He used to be a professional office.
Hold on. I would disagree with you. Obama is not lacking in intelligence. He is extremely intelligent. What he is lacking in is a love of America. What he is lacking in is any character and any values that we recognize as American. But he's always known that. He just was able to fool everybody else.
The will of the American people. You know, he can have his opinions, but in the end, you know, it's supposed to be. That's the same with like the establishment for the Republicans. You know, if they're going to choose who our candidate is going to be, our nominee, then what do they need us for? That's what gets me is about the establishment doesn't like Trump. Well, who cares what the establishment likes? You know, as far look at Russia. You know, Putin chose Putin. You know, as far as I'm concerned, is the establishment going to choose who the next nominee is going to be for us? I mean,
well, that's what they usually do. They do it almost every time.
Exactly. And that's why we don't. Maybe that's why we've had 8 years of Obama.
Well, but let me lay out a little bit of hope. There, in politics, you oftentimes have candidates who can articulate a powerful message. They ride a wave like a surfer at the perfect time. The only problem is eventually they crash and get crushed in the coral below and break their neck or whatever, and they're out of the race. In large part because the race is controlled by donors, and there's only so many donors in politics. And now, of course, if you're a new and exciting candidate, you can inspire a whole new group of people to become donors. And you see guys like Ted Cruz do that, and others. Someone like Ronald Reagan would have done that, even though he did have some backing from some major players. But he fought the establishment the entire way through. And he did it by understanding the game. And here's the only problem for Donald Trump, and you'll probably appreciate the outcome, but you're going to have a tremendous amount of resources targeted at him to create an unfavorable opinion. They're going to try to take him down, take him out. Now, it could succeed, and if it succeeds, then the natural beneficiary will be someone like Ted Cruz, who is still conservative enough, or arguably much more conservative than Donald Trump, but not as much of a showman. So it doesn't really matter what Ted Cruz believes. It matters what people hear about Ted Cruz and what he believes. And that he's going to have to step up at the right moment and start putting a real message out. But he did himself a huge favor by taking on the media, defending his fellow Republicans, and just firing a perfect shot that was heard around the world.
Yeah, well, Trump, you know, everything that Trump has brought out to the table is everything that nobody else really could have said. If Trump had not been in this race, you wouldn't have heard about the immigration. You wouldn't have heard about what he would like to do to ISIS. You wouldn't have heard about waterboarding. He's got nothing to lose. You know, that's the thing is he's got nothing to lose. He's not politically correct. He has not, in my opinion, he got nothing to lose, so he can say whatever the hell he wants. Someone like Ted Cruz, if he would have stepped in like that, he'd have been gone by now. But Ted Cruz can say it a little more articulate, where he can.
The media hates Ted Cruz. I don't think you understand how deeply embedded that hatred goes. They think he's a troglodyte. Oh, yeah. They think he is a fool and a hateful, evil person. Now, they don't think he's unintelligent. Alan Dershowitz said he was the best student he ever had, so he's clearly an accomplished constitutional lawyer. I believe in Texas he was, I don't know if he was attorney general or district attorney. He did something with law. Don't have his entire background in front of me, but he has a record of accomplishment. And he has stood up consistently against Obamacare, one of the only ones. And that really is a nonpartisan issue. That's the part that the GOP establishment doesn't get. But they're terrified of shrinking government and cutting off people who have just been given some massive new... It's kind of like some gang steals a bunch of money from a bank and they give it out to people all over the place on the streets to maybe block the cops from chasing them. And the cops get up there and they're afraid to take the money back from the people. That's kind of how I see this.
Yeah. But, they should also keep in mind, the Republicans should also keep in mind, is the establishment, that if it wasn't for the Republican establishment, maybe there wouldn't be a Tea Party that they hate so bad. I mean, if we had conservative Republicans, the way
truth and sincerity is the Ronald Reagan wing of the Republican Party. It includes a lot of Democrats who are ticked off at government that's out of control, that has overstepped its bounds, that has invaded their lives and tried to control them. That was the Ronald Reagan wing of the Republican Party. All that's left after that is the country club they wouldn't let Ronald Reagan into. That's it.
Yeah, and you say government, that's plural. That's Republicans and the Democrats.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This government has grown because of these political parties and their inability and ineffectiveness at doing anything they said they were going to do.
Yeah. You want to see some cool stuff, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, you've probably heard it, but if you go on YouTube or whatever, and you look at Ronald Reagan, some of his speeches, like even back in the 50s, where he talks about, he's had the same rhetoric his whole life. It's never changed about what this country was and should be. And if you listen to his speech, and it's almost like listening to John Wayne and son. I mean, it's just awe-inspiring. And I don't think I don't think it's changed to this day.
No, look, I don't think Ronald Reagan.
My belief, what he was saying in the 50s. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Ronald Reagan was the Tea Partier. The epic speech for me was October 27th, 1963, A Time for Choosing. It's 29 minutes, 33 seconds. You can listen to it on YouTube. We've played it before on this show, but you know what? You give me an idea. I'm going to dig up some of those clips, and we'll bring them back. But Frank, thanks for the call. We've got to take a quick break, and we will be right back. So ISIS has been hard at work trying to terrify the world, and at the same time, they have one of the most massive PR campaigns I've ever seen. I actually think ISIS is better at PR than the GOP. Of course, that's not a tough hurdle because it's a very low bar, because the GOP is so bad at PR. They don't understand it. They don't understand how to connect with people. And when I say the GOP, I'm talking about the GOP elitists who run the national party, the state party here in California, people who always want to take the safe route. They want to be liked. They want to be in the center. They want to give whatever entitlements they need to give away just to be liked. We don't care if government grows. We were talking earlier to Frank from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and he made a good point. Government continues to grow because of both Republicans and Democrats, because they all have their favorite little programs, their pet peeves, and the Republicans make a big show about how they want government to shrink. They think government's the problem. They parody and echo Ronald Reagan's government is not the solution, government is the problem. But the problem is, those are just words. Their actions, there's no follow through. There's no commitment when it comes down to it, because they don't want to be called names. They don't want to be called Islamophobes. We're going to have a video coming up a little bit later. A young conservative in Colorado and her epic rant. And it is priceless. It is She reminds us of what our American leaders used to say and how they used to rally the country in a time of crisis. Right now, you've got a foreign entity that is threatening American targets. They have threatened to turn the White House black. They have threatened to come in to different cities like New York and launch terrorist attacks against innocent people. What does our government do? What do our so-called leaders do? They defend the attacker against the harsh words by the American people. They take the other side. They lecture Americans on not overreacting. You know, it is so reminiscent of that time after Hitler first emerged on the world stage. And nobody would take him seriously. You had Neville Chamberlain, who said, hey, you know what, we can contain him, it'll all be fine. We've negotiated with Hitler and everything's great. And within months, tanks rolled into Poland. And Neville Chamberlain's words were revealed for what they truly were, which was appeasement. It was surrender. The only problem was he surrendered the lives and the sovereignty of one of his allies. He allowed Poland to be overrun. He allowed Poland to suffer the brutality and the genocide of the Nazis uninterrupted for what I'm sure to the Polish seemed an eternity. Then emerged Khrushchev. Oh, excuse me. What am I saying? That's Churchill. You had Winston Churchill become the next prime minister, and he had a very simple, very understandable policy, which was you fight evil. And he launched air raids and attacks and eventually persuaded help from the Americans, even before we officially entered the war. But he did so, he rallied the nation by speaking the truth. We don't have anybody who will speak the truth. Now, running for president, Donald Trump is speaking the truth. He is being roundly demonized every which way but loose. It's hard to quantify all the different attacks. He's being attacked by Chris Christie and Tom Brokaw, who say Trump claimed that there were Palestinians or Arabs or Muslims who were on the shores in New Jersey cheering the collapse of the trade towers after 9/11. Now, I don't recall and would need to see some evidence, but Trump is sticking to his guns, and he'd be foolish if he's incorrect, because if he's incorrect, he needs to acknowledge it. But so far, Tom Brokaw is taking him to task. Chris Christie is taking him to task. And the only thing I can say in Trump's defense is very simply, he is the only candidate other than, well, Ted Cruz is doing it as well, but there are very few who will speak any truth about the true nature of evil represented by Islamic jihad. I don't like to call them Islamic extremists. It's Islamic jihad because, see, jihad, I remember back in high school studying the concept of jihad. I believe I was in 11th grade. It's some kind of government class. And I remember because I was home sick because I was paying my way through high school, and there was so much stress with working and sports and keeping my grades up. I was at a college prep school, but I was paying the tuition. And I think I was behind on my tuition. Surprise, surprise. And I went to the dentist. My dad had won. He bid. You know how they have these fundraisers at schools? He went there and he bid on a family dental plan. Now, I am sure this dentist did not intend to give away free dental care to a family of 14 children and 2 adults, so 16 people. But that was my family. And my dad won that for $200. I mean, what a bargain. I can't even imagine what that should have cost then, nor what it would cost now. But I went to the dentist. I had a really painful toothache, and it turns out the dentist said, look, you're grinding your teeth, you're bruxing, you're under so much stress. Then he spotted a gray hair. Here I am, 17 years old, and I've got a gray hair. And he said, you need to stay home. You need to take some Advil or whatever he told me, and you need to just de-stress for a couple days, which, of course, I think I lasted about a full 24 hours. That was it. But I had a lot of homework, and I'm sitting there doing my homework. And, you know, for once, I'm not rushed. I'm not in the pell-mell of normal life. And I'm reading this stuff about jihad and about this concept. And see, we didn't study it the way they study study Islam in today's public schools. I was in a private school, but in today's public schools, they're telling you the 5 pillars of Islam. They're telling you all about everything, almost as if they're trying to proselytize you or inoculate you into accepting, or I don't even know why they're talking about the religion itself. I think they should talk about its place in history, which is what we did in my private school. And what we discovered was there was a concept that enabled the faithful Muslim, to go to war with the infidel, with the unbeliever, to basically kill in the name of Allah. Now, admittedly, during the Crusades, Christians did the same thing. And the only difference is Christian leaders condemned that, and that ended. That crusade is not going on today. Christians are not out killing Muslims because they won't convert to Christianity. There is no place in the Bible, there is no place in the scriptures that authorizes you to murder in the name of Christ. It just doesn't exist. It is not in the Holy Scriptures, just the same way that jihad is for the Muslim. I just remember being struck by that and wondering and having sort of a moment of clarity at 17 years old, and understanding that the world would eventually be at war. Not because we declared war on them, but because they declared war on us. And at the time, it was just a feeling. It was a glimpse. It was a vision that maybe lasted 3 seconds, and a glimmer of fear. And here we are in 2015. I'm almost 50 years old. I will be this year in May. No, this next year. Thank God. I'm not there yet. And yet, jihad, worldwide jihad, has been declared. And we had Pamela Geller on last week. And if you missed that segment, you need to go on my Facebook page. There's a link right to timdonnellyshow.com. And you can hear, it's a very short interview, but very powerful. She goes through all these different organizations that have so-called hijacked peaceful Islam. And in the piece she wrote for Breitbart.com, it's probably over 100 different organizations that she has listed. And it really makes you begin to wonder and begin to question what the entire agenda is. And I think a lot of Americans have a lot more questions than answers. 323-746-TALK. We'll take a break and be right back with more answers here at the Tim Donnelly Show. Hey, welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. We are getting your input on all of this insanity. First name and city. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. My name's Debbie. I'm from Palmdale, California. Hey, I was calling when you were doing that story on Trump said there were Muslims cheering in the streets after 9/11. There were, and there's documented proof. The Washington Post had run a story on it.
Right. But the difference, I agree with you, but they were in, I believe they were on the West Bank and they were Palestinians. This, what he is saying, and we have a clip of Tom Brokaw criticizing him. We'll play that in a minute. But he's saying that it was happening right across the river in New Jersey, and that Muslims in New Jersey. So, of course, Chris Christie's going to get offended by that. Tom Brokaw is pretending that he's the only voice of truth and reason in the world. And I think we know by now all of these so-called news readers that we trusted for many years are just that. They just read whatever's put in front of them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I have a tendency to believe Trump, though, until someone can prove him wrong. I'm not necessarily a fan of his as a person, but as a politician, oh yeah.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Hold on a second, Debbie. We're going to play this clip, and then I'll get your reaction. So hang on the phone.
All right. Let me bring in the panel. Tom, you were wanting to jump in there.
Well, no, I just was thinking to myself that Governor Kasich is about to become the most popular subject on the right-wing social media circuit after that appearance here this morning.
Why is that?
He'll be taken on for challenging the idea that we have to have some kind of a security list for all Muslims who come into this country and not have a relationship with them around the world. When you talk about a war on Islam, you're talking about a war on Indonesia, for example, most of the subcontinent of Asia. So when he then challenges that premise on the part of both Donald Trump and Carson, who are doing extremely well in the polls, he's going to find himself a target on social media. You cannot underestimate the impact of social media in spreading a lot of not just the outrageous positions, but flat out lies. When Donald Trump says that he saw in Jersey City thousands of people cheering the Twin Trade Towers coming down, it's completely wrong. It did not happen. Right. He didn't see it. But who's there to challenge him on that?
Right.
So, Debbie, I think many of us saw, and we were incensed by seeing Palestinians and some Muslims around the world who were putting their fists in the air. I remember it. I remember it vividly, and they were celebrating the attack against the great Satan in their minds. But I couldn't tell you if it happened in New Jersey, and I think there would be some sort of footage that Trump's people would have brought forward by now. And if he's wrong, he's just got to say, hey, look, I misunderstood it or misremembered it and move on, because there's no point in giving them any foothold against him.
Yeah, and when he said it, the mainstream propaganda machine went out to prove that Trump was lying, because they've been trying to get him since the day he entered this race. And it was the Washington Post. I could look it up again, but it was the Washington Post, and it did happen in New Jersey. Now, Trump said he saw hundreds. The Washington Post didn't mention how many there were. But the Washington Post did, in fact, write an article, a story, that there were, in fact, Muslims in New Jersey cheering about 9/11.
Well, we will look it up, and we'll bring you the latest on that, because it is.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. I had forgotten about it. I heard it on a different show. A caller said, "Oh no, there was." And I looked it up during my break during work today, and there is. The Washington Post, who is challenging Trump, is the very ones that wrote the original story.
Well, when I look lines right now, because you're onto one thing. Here's the headlines right now when you look up Muslims in New Jersey cheering about 9/11. Well, we'll have to get to that when we get back. But Debbie, thank you for the call. We will be right back after this short break. So, As I skim the headlines doing a simple Google search, I found the report that Debbie, our caller in the previous segment, is referring to. The only problem is, depending on how you search it, it comes up and says thousands of New Jersey Muslims celebrated the 9/11 attacks. But the reality is their full headline is Trump's outrageous claim that thousands of New Jersey Muslims celebrated the 9/11 attacks. That's the Washington Post. When you go down the scroll bar on the right-hand side, when you're on that story, they have a number of things. Hillary Clinton is the most trusted candidate in 2016 on terrorism. Nothing like being a little bit biased. 4 theories why Donald Trump's many falsehoods aren't hurting him. Donald Trump is increasingly leading an increasingly fact-free 2016 campaign. Here's the thing. There is a clear bias in the media. Fox News has a bias for GOP establishment Republicans. Note, I didn't say conservative. Fox News is not conservative. Most conservatives know that because they've watched the antics. And the bottom line is, news organizations are no longer in the fact-finding, truth-telling business. They're in the business of selling soap for major monolithic global entities, otherwise known as corporations. That's it. They don't care about anything else. Now, they might have individual hosts who care very much about their own integrity, who care about telling the truth, who care about getting to the bottom of the story. Megyn Kelly is one of them. Even though she's been hard on Donald Trump, I love her because she digs deep and she goes after everyone. Now, she went after Donald Trump particularly hard because obviously she's embarrassed that he might be the Republican nominee. Too bad. She'll have to deal with it. But as I go through these headlines, it's an education in how the media works. You have Ben Carson on a blog. Ben Carson insists he's seen the non-existent video of New Jersey Muslims celebrating 9/11. Then you have CNN. Carson walks back support for Trump's disputed 9/11 celebration claim. Nobody just comes out and says, hey, look, because here's the thing. Most of us don't know, don't remember, and don't have the time or the resources to do the search. You'd think the media would just search it and say, hey, look, never happened. It's non-existent. There is no video. And Trump, and the burden is on Donald Trump to either, and he needs to do it today, no later, either produce a video or produce a news story, or you got to walk it back, Donald. And I think Donald Trump struggles with that. So then the question will become, what will the impact be? Will it hurt him? I don't know if it hurts him. Now, if even if, as it looks like, it is demonstrably not factual, I think people will give him to some extent the benefit of the doubt because the media is so brazen and so overt now in their nonstop assault on every word he says. Now, the media could care less that 8 Syrians were caught at the Texas border. The media could care less that ISIS is talking about taking on targets here, and they could care less that Hillary Clinton doesn't tell the truth almost all the time, whether she's talking about Bill Clinton raping a woman, which is now back in the news, or what she had or didn't have on her secret server. So when it comes to very serious matters of national security, when it comes to a major issue of Hillary's, which is women's rights, she claims that all women who have been assaulted, sexually assaulted, have absolute right to stand up and speak the truth against their rapist, their perpetrator, unless, of course, it's her husband. And there's the hypocrisy. And Donald Trump's been calling her out for that. Not the news media, Donald Trump. So if Donald Trump got it wrong, what he got wrong wasn't that Muslims were cheering. He got it wrong, the geographical location. And it looks like he did get that wrong. But people, I believe, will forgive him because he's over-exuberant and he cares. And Hillary doesn't care about women. She just pretends to care, and that's obvious because she's got her husband who brutally raped a woman who went on NBC News, did a major interview. I forget the lady's name. I think it was Soledad O'Brien, who did this incredible interview, and then NBC sunk it and said, we're not going to show it till after the impeachment trials are over. Well, it was far more serious of a charge against Bill Clinton than anything that was being alleged during the impeachment trials, because nobody in the American public could truly relate to the impeachment trials beyond the prurient interest in the sexual escapades with Monica and cigars and all that. Hey, wait a minute. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Hillary Clinton. Monica Lewinsky. I haven't been with that woman in years. and of course, if I was, I do not recall. See, that's all to the American public. That's all it was ever about. To the people on the inside, to the people who've read the books, and there are volumes of books about the serious crimes that Bill Clinton committed while in office and beforehand. Most particularly the rapes and then the cover-up and then the intimidation. But nobody cares. They don't care because it isn't presented the way it is presented against Donald Trump. See, the way they present the news against Donald Trump is the way we used to present the news against our enemies. When we were fighting the Japanese, we didn't hold back. We had newsreels that were produced by Hollywood that were in movies. Every single movie that you watched, before you watched it, you got a newsreel about what the Japs did. Air quotes there, so don't get all worked up. But that's what they were called. We dehumanized them. We denigrated them. We took our enemy and turned them into an it instead of people. That way, you could galvanize a nation against and unify a nation against a common enemy. We did the same thing with the Germans. We did the same thing with every enemy we had in every war up until recently, when, of course, I would say Vietnam. The whole country just splintered and sort of went in a bunch of different directions. But prior to that, when we were fighting a war, it was all hands on deck. But see, now, the left stream media that is completely controlled by Marxists and progressives, they look at someone like Donald Trump as an it. He needs to be dehumanized. He needs to be absolutely broken down and stereotyped and become an it. And so the headlines are always vehemently, ardently, and passionately biased. Biased isn't even a good enough word. They're almost like a weapon. They're like a weapon being deployed against Trump and the Republicans. The only thing is, with some of the other Republicans, this stuff works because they let it work, because they fall back and they falter and they fall apart and they start to equivocate and apologize. And next thing you know, they sound just like every other politician. Donald Trump ain't doing that. He's holding the line. And because he's holding the line, he will continue to be demonized. We will take a quick break. Come back. I've got an incredible clip for you. You will not want to miss. Stay tuned. You will not believe this video. It was posted up on YouTube by a young woman in Colorado, young conservative, and the clarity with which she calls out the issues should be a hallmark to every candidate running for president, Republican or Democrat. This is not a Republican or Democrat thing. We used to be united in our love of America, and we used to be able to denounce any threat to it. And we've been clear on this show, and most people have been clear on the right, that we did not declare war on Islam. But a segment of Islam has declared war on us, and we don't know how many people who are Muslim, who adhere to Islam, how many of them support it. We don't know. There's a bunch of polls out. I don't believe any of that. Who's gonna admit that they're secretly cheering that completely innocent people are having their blood splattered all over the walls, that are being blown to bits, that are being shot while trying to enjoy a concert? Who would ever admit to being sympathetic to that? I don't think anybody would. But the silence of the Muslim community, the silence of those who claim that they adhere to the so-called religion of peace, is deafening. Not only their silence, but their lack of action and their lack of doing anything that would show that they actually are in allegiance with America. Especially if you're a Muslim on American soil, you chose to come here. So no one put a gun to your head. And my question is, where's the outrage? I mean, you know how the media treats when somebody that they can try in some arcane, bizarre way to trace back to the Tea Party or conservatives or white Southern Christians, the easiest group to demonize in the entire world, that is stereotyped by everybody who claims that stereotyping anybody is a great crime against humanity. When Obama wants to demonize white Southern Christians and goes after the Confederate flag because of the deaths of 9 innocent people in a church committed by Dylan Roof, an individual who was a racist and a mass murderer and an evil person, he doesn't represent the Tea Party or conservatives or white people or anything else. But they made it sound that way. But when it comes to a religion that is observed by and followed by billions of people around the globe, they're silent. And I don't think they should demonize the entire religion. I think they should just speak the truth that it is coming from Islam. This Islamic jihad is Islamic in nature. That's the truth. It is a threat to peace-loving, and it is a threat to freedom everywhere, especially when we begin to see our government and the press silencing free speech, whether it's on a college campus or in a newspaper or on radio, trying to silence the debate. And that's why you will love this video. Just listen. I'm going to be quiet and let it roll.
Dear ISIL, I wanted to be one of the first to congratulate you on your graduation from the level of scum to the peak of pusillanimous maggots. I must say, personally, I am impressed at how quickly you progressed to that stage, but not in the least bit surprised that you finally did make it. You have most certainly turned all of the heads that you have not sawed off and managed to grasp the attention of the world. And to think, you only had to slaughter roughly 10,000 innocent men, women, and children to do so. For the last 2 years, I have sat in the comfort of my home watching your power-hungry posse of misfits terrorize the world, all while listening to your vitriolic diatribe and farcical sense of reasoning for annihilating those whom you call disbelievers in the name of Allah. It is my understanding, after having educated myself on the foundation of your brutality and the origin of your beliefs, that you will stop at nothing until you accomplish everything. Everything being what your God says is everything, not you. You were once quoted by saying, "We fear not the swarms of planes, nor ballistic missiles, nor drones, nor satellites, nor battleships, nor weapons of mass destruction. How could we fear them, while Allah the Exalted has said, if Allah should aid you, no one can overcome you." And just like that, you consider yourselves invincible. Isn't it fascinating how religion works? We, being those who participate in the idea of believing in an intangible entity, become the judge, jury, and executioner to those who do not believe as we do, all in the name of that very being. I'm a bit ambivalent to this concept, as I am a Christian and do not condone your tactics at praising your God, but it was not too long ago that Christians did the very same thing in the name of ours. So this, coupled with your sadistic slaying of thousands, is why you have graduated to a level worthy of the attention you have received by those whom you wish to destroy. Some call it a war on terrorism, others a war on religion, some even call it a war on power and politics. Americans, however, Those of us who do not follow blindly and do not fall to our knees in the wake of fear and Islamic extremism call this a war on life. And if there's one thing I know about my country, it's that her people do not take kindly to those attempting to end it. You see, we have a set of values in this country: pride, honor, integrity. And for years now, we have allowed our leaders to define those values and dictate when we use them and how. I'm sure it will come as no surprise to you that those same leaders are now the individuals who have polished and defined America's bark, but have yet to brush the dust back off her bite. They have sat idly by, twiddling their thumbs and tightening the chains around the necks of my countrymen when they snarl at the taste of Islamic blood. They have implemented rules of engagement so as to spare the destruction and annihilation of those whom you stand aside. They have coddled our enemies and nurtured their foundation, all while telling my people to stand down and remain silent. And for this reason, my country is ready to release the chains of moral ambiguity that have suppressed our ability to defend our nation against all enemies sworn to destroy her. The President of the United States no longer possesses the ability to speak on behalf of the American people. He has turned his back on us, and as a result, we have turned our fronts to you. So if you want something, you have to come through us to get it. I implore you to reconsider your next move, though, because once you activate on American soil, you will be coming head-to-head and toe-to-toe with the beast that will redefine your definition of Judgment Day. And the last thing you will see before your 72 virgins is the face of an American that validated your one-way ticket to the show. Make no mistake about it, America does not fear ISIL. We have been waiting for the opportunity that you have presented at our feet like the gullible little puppies that you are, biting the ankles of someone much bigger than they. You prey on those that do not stand a chance against you. You hide behind your masks and stand behind those you execute like sheepish cowards, beating your chest and chanting death to America. You are not invincible to this nation's thirst for blood of our enemies just because your God says you are. You are not indestructible from the shrapnel of our honor and liberty just because your God says you are. You are not impenetrable to the blade of our country's sword just because your God says that you are. You will need a lot more than his words to protect you from a war on American soil, because when it comes to life or death in these United States, we don't play by the rules of the government. The United States of America will not bow to radical Islam, and we will not be backed into a corner by the hands of our enemy. Keep that in mind when you knock on our door, because you cannot possibly begin to fathom what is waiting for you on the other side.
Exactly, and I couldn't have
Quote
said it
from my father.
Better. We'll play the rest of it when we get back. We're going to go back and play the last quarter of that video because it's so insanely good. This, by the way, was posted on Facebook by a young woman in Colorado named Emily Longworth. When I first heard about it about 3 hours ago, it had 7 million views. It now has 8,323,246 views. And we have a link up at timdonnellyshow.com so you can hear it and see it in its entirety. And I'll warn you, there is some cussing in the last part of it. And but our chief engineer, Sean, bleeped it out. And we're going to go ahead and play this from a point where she began to, her point is, first of all, she warns ISIS about who we are. And then she talks to Americans and says, look, Obama can't protect you, but Americans will. And she issues an American-style warning to ISIS about ever coming to our shores.
I implore you to reconsider your next move, though, because once you activate on American soil, you will be coming head-to-head and toe-to-toe with the beast that will redefine your definition of Judgment Day. And the last thing you will see before your 72 virgins is the face of an American that validated your one-way ticket to the show. Make no mistake about it, America does not fear ISIL. We have been waiting for the opportunity that you have presented at our feet like the gullible little puppies that you are, biting the ankles of someone much bigger than they. You prey on those that do not stand a chance against you. You hide behind your masks and stand behind those you execute like sheepish cowards, beating your chest and chanting death to America. You are not invincible to this nation's thirst for blood of our enemies just because your God says you are. You are not indestructible from the shrapnel of our honor and liberty just because your God says you are. You are not impenetrable to the blade of our country's sword just because your God says that you are. You will need a lot more than his words to protect you from a war on American soil, because when it comes to life or death in these United States, we don't play by the rules of the government. The United States of America will not bow to radical Islam, and we will not be backed into a corner by the hands of our enemy. Keep that in mind when you knock on our door, because you cannot possibly begin to fathom what is waiting for you on the other side. Quote for you from my father. ISIS members, every one of you is a pig-eating son of a whore. F*** you, your mother, your f***ing prophet, and that offspring of a pig you call Allah. Am I being too vague? End quote.
That is from Emily Long. Let me find it again here. Emily Longworth from Colorado. It's been shared 254,000 times. And look, when your enemy, and ISIS is a sworn enemy of the United States, so be clear in what she's talking about. She says ISIL, like the president, which is the Islamic State of Levant, otherwise known as the Islamic State of whatever. I don't even know. But they're one and the same. But see, the difference between the way she's talking and the way our politicians talk today is our politicians today have been neutered. They have been watered down. They have been turned into geldings who have no balls. They refuse to call out the truth. And if you're going to engage in a war, if people are going to come here and kill Americans, let's just think about this for a minute. And you can't even say why they're coming. You can't say, hey, by the way, they've got a grudge. It's a grudge from the 14th century, but they hate infidels and they haven't gotten over the Crusades. And they've got it in their book, their holy book, that they can kill you and kill any innocent. They can lie to you. This is all approved by their religion in their religious book. But let's not criticize their religion. Hey, I say we criticize every religion. Bottom line, freedom of religion doesn't mean you're free from being offended. People criticize Christians all the time. They criticize Catholics all the time. They criticize Jews all the time. They criticize Buddhists. They criticize everybody. That's America. But if you silence dissent, if you silence the truth, if you silence those who are vehemently speaking out against those who wish to do us harm, and the silencing is coming from those who are supposed to be protecting this country from invasion. I mean, Article 4, Section 4 in the Constitution is crystal clear. The federal government, under the control of whoever happens to be in charge at the time, shall keep each state free from invasion. Well, guess what? That's been an epic fail. We have millions of illegal aliens who have invaded our country for various reasons. Some of them just came here to work and they seem nice enough, and some of them seem like they came here to work, but then they wind up becoming murderers and killing cops, like that guy up in Sacramento County last year. He's such a nice guy. He did such a good job on my yard. That's what one lady said in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he came from, but somehow he got a driver's license, he got an assault weapon. Oh yeah, that whole gun control thing ain't working for you. You leftists that want to institute more gun control, because a full-blown illegal alien with multiple aliases got a gun and slaughtered a couple of cops in cold blood, shot him in the head execution style. Oh yeah, it turns out he was an operative for the Mexican mafia. You forgot to notate that when he was cutting people's lawns and being the good little illegal alien. Well, you know what? Screw that. I don't want to let any illegal aliens in if there's a chance that we're going to have 2 American citizens executed in cold blood. I don't want to let Syrian refugees in, given that some will hide amongst them as wolves among the sheep, as we know, just like down at our border, which is wide open. I know this. I've been there. I lived on the border for 30 days. I watched it. I listened to women being raped on the other side. I listened and saw the evidence of those coming into this country who were not coming here to just have a better life and survive financially and maybe be able to provide for their families. I saw those who were coming here and had abandoned prayer rugs and Qurans in the little caves where they hide out and wait for their moment to sneak past the very understaffed Border Patrol agents, largely because we don't have any physical security along the border because it's become too political to actually build a physical barrier. But meanwhile, we have politicians who can't even speak the truth. So when we hear an American, especially a young person, who says, well, a lot of us are thinking, and yeah, maybe her dad's comment goes a little too far for many people, and maybe they're not comfortable with it. So what? That's exactly what we did to the Japanese and the Germans to get people angry against an enemy that wished to wipe us off the face of the earth. And make no mistake, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. They ambushed innocent, peace-loving soldiers. Yes, they attacked soldiers, but they attacked them when we were not at war with them. It was a cowardly ambush. But it woke up Americans. And I think what she's saying is true. We saw the same thing in the war that we eventually got in with Germany when, I forget the name of that, I believe it was the Lusitania was attacked by a German U-boat and sunk, and Americans were killed for no reason. They were civilians. Well, guess what? ISIS only kills civilians. That's it. That's all they do. They only kill civilians. They don't kill soldiers. They don't go somewhere they might actually be in a war with people shooting back. But mark my words, you bring that crap here to American soil. You want to come in my backyard and start killing people? You will be able to count the seconds before you will meet your 72 whores or whatever the hell it is you're going to see before you see Allah. You won't have time to yell out Allahu Akbar or any of that crap because we will smoke you. We will put a 45 with hollow points in your head and you won't even know what hit you. You're not in France. This ain't Paris. So bring it on. That's how most Americans feel. We're sick and tired of watching innocent people die. So you want to bring that crap here to America? I agree with the young woman in the video. It'll be the biggest tactical mistake you ever made. You're much better off going after the soft underbelly of Europe. And you're much better off going after the little hotels and the little tiny cafes and clubs and things that you consider represent the decadence of the West. As a matter of fact, there's a story out there. There was an interview, and this individual who is his name's Abu Bakr al-Makdadis. Macadaddies, I don't know what the hell. He was in a radio interview on Sunday, 30-year-old Palestinian from Gaza who recently had just gone out and fought for the Islamic State, returned to Gaza Strip after being injured in Iraq. And he was discussing his experiences, and he basically said, hey, look, if a Muslim is there, if a Muslim is in a cafe or in a restaurant or in a theater where there's dancing and alcohol and prostitution and singing, I don't think he's a good Muslim, and he deserves what happens to him. And he will have Allah to answer to. So He also stated that women who provoke men's desire sexually deserve to be killed. Well, that pretty much ends every single one of the nightclubs in any Western capital. You're going to have women dressed provocatively. It's just part of what young people do in the Western world. But that's what they're targeting. That was their excuse. They're not killing soldiers. They're killing people dressed in miniskirts and out for a good time. But God help them, because Allah can't. They bring it here. 323-746-TALK. We'll take your calls when we get back. You have found your way to the Radio Free California Network. I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in the state of California. Our call-in number is 323-746-TALK, 323-746-8255 for those of you who are driving. You can also call in via Skype, should you choose to. That's simply Talk 960. Talk Radio 960 is how you reach us that way. We've been talking about a video that is received 8.2 million views in the past 24 hours. And it is one of the more eloquent attempts by anyone in recent history to explain to those who have targeted us. Let's be clear about that. We didn't go out looking for an enemy and target ISIS. ISIS targeted us. Islamic Jihad is against America, the great Satan. And it had many other names. Before it was ISIS, it was Al-Qaeda, it was the Taliban, it was all the myriad 150 names on the article by Pamela Geller. This is not new. There is an element of Islam that is in an active war with the West. And what this young woman does with her video is she fires back and explains how Americans think and what we do. And we are unlike any other country on the face of the earth. You know, I know it's become very vogue to put down America on college campuses, to view this country as if we were the aggressor in every war around the continent, even though history tells a very different story. In almost every case, we had to be dragged into the war kicking and screaming. I described to you earlier some of the incidents that occurred to drag us into wars, like Pearl Harbor, like the sinking of the Lusitania, like all kinds of different events that provoked us. But once we engage, once Americans put their minds to destroying you, to wiping you off the face of the earth, you're going to wish to hell that we didn't know where all those stupid little caves are in Iraq and Afghanistan. See, we've been crawling all over them, so we know exactly where every one of them is, and we can probably drop a missile on any one of them at any given time. So when you run, there'll be no place to hide. When you wake up the sleeping giant that is America, the people who love liberty, and you can't love liberty without loving life. People who love peace, who want to be left alone, they want to be left in peace. When you awaken their wrath, and Americans' wrath is a rare thing. We tend to be the easygoing father, you know, in the neighborhood. We're sort of out watching, palling around with everybody, but a threat emerges. Somebody wants to do a drive-by shooting in the neighborhood, starts shooting up the kids that are playing in the streets or in their front yard. That's when you see that easygoing Mr. Rogers type father all of a sudden pull out his 45 and smoke the bad guys before anybody even had a chance to snap their fingers. Yeah. But that's just one type of American. There's a whole other America that lives underground that has been preparing for war. And you'll be dealing with them too. And they'll never stop until you're dead. They will simply end you. So bring it on, ISIS. Bring it on. Perfect song to talk about who we are as Americans. By the way, you won't want to miss Friday's show. Good friend of mine who is an extraordinary artist. You may have noticed on Fridays, we oftentimes get off of politics and into art, like acting. We had Basil Hoffman on last Friday, and we are going to have my good friend Mimi Page, who makes some of the most extraordinary music you never knew you would come to love. I say it that way because I didn't like the genre or even the music when I first heard it, but something just spoke to me when I was driving listening to this CD of hers, and I think it will speak to you if you're open. But at any rate, she and her fiance will be in studio in the Radio Free California Network studios this Friday. You do not want to miss the show, even though, of course, you will be running around, I assume, in a mall somewhere on Black Friday if you're that inclined. I will not give you a hard time because you will suffer enough simply by doing that. But we've been talking about this incredible video, and I'm on the Facebook page of this young Emily Longworth. Evidently, she served this country in the Army or in some capacity. She went from having about 1,786 friends to becoming a public figure and having followers, which is something you do when you become someone in the public eye. And it's rather extraordinary that someone who is simply an ordinary American could engender such enthusiasm for America, because that's what she's talking about. She's not talking about ISIS, or I should say Islam. She does talk about the activities of ISIS, about them cutting off the heads of 10,000 people, about them slaughtering innocents, about their cowardly tactics. But in the end, she's really talking about us. She's talking about who we are as Americans. And I found it incredibly encouraging, because you hear so often that the next generation, Generation X or Y or Y2K or Y2Z, I don't know, I can't figure it all out, that somehow you can't reach them, that they're on another planet. Well, I've never believed that. Anytime people make these vast generalizations about people based on their age, you know what? Everyone grows up, and every generation before it thinks the generation behind it is going to drop the ball and be slackers and fall apart. And every generation behind us generally picks up the ball. They figure out a way to do things differently. I mean, think about it. I remember when I was running my business, and I was the guy that would go out and measure things and draw things, and then I would have to go back to my house. I would have to make a blueprint. I would have to check it. I would have to make it clean and neat so that I could fax it across the country to another country where somebody would make the parts, or to what seemed like another country back, to the deep south, or to Michigan or Virginia or wherever. I had 5 suppliers. One of them was in Canada, and the rest were spread all over the United States. And I would have to then quote the job, so that therefore I'd have to get bids from all over the place. I would have to do all of this either stop at a payphone and try to make some early phone calls and get stuff going. But we were at a 3-hour delay. So I would wind up back in my office and I would send faxes. This is before email. So I'd type everything up, print it out, and then send a fax. And I could send a fax in the middle of the night. Nobody cared. So the next morning, 3 hours before I got up, I'd get a bid. So the bid would be there on my desk, and then I would take the bid and I would crunch all the numbers and I would go back and sell the job or rebid it, depending on whether I'd already gotten it and whether or not there were just some changes. But then I'd have to go through and pore over the blueprints, check all the engineering, prescribe the different kinds of steel and heat treats and surface treatments that might go on them, such as nitriding or titanium nitriding or, heat treating to a certain Rockwell hardness and then nitriding on top of that. There were all kinds of things we did with all kinds of different steels, and I had to learn all that. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the fact that everything was so clunky. See, if I could have done all of that in my car, I would have been 100 times more efficient. Well, guess what? Now that all of my manufacturing customers are in China, I could pull up to their non-existent factories and I can process all of it in my car on a laptop attached to a personal hotspot on my cell phone. I can send the email. I can scan in or take a picture of the blueprint good enough that they can see it and quote it. It's extraordinary. I could generate the entire job right there sitting in their parking lot. Or if I want to be fancy, I could go to a Starbucks or a McDonald's where they give you free Wi-Fi. Well, that didn't exist. It was brought about largely by a revolution in thinking. And revolutions in thinking are almost always done by younger people who throw off the shackles of how it's always been done. So the next time you feel like saying something about the next generation, about how they're not as hardworking, you know what? Maybe they figured out a way to work smarter. And maybe they figured out a way to spend more time with their families and still make money and still get everything done. One thing I've noticed about a lot of the people that are younger is they're a little more relaxed because they know how to use all the technology. I won't even get into. My wife and I tried to watch we wanted to watch a movie. I rented some movies, but my son had a couple of friends over. And of course, where are they going to be? They're going to be on the, what do you call it? I call it the PCP player, but it's the PS3. They're on the PlayStation. They're down there making things happen. And I'm over. Anyway, I'm trying to get a VCR to work. Simple as that. Now, I knew we had it sort of hooked up backwards, so we pull it out, dust everything off, and we're moving the cables around, and then I'll get to the rest of the story in a minute. Let's take a quick break. 323-746-TALK. We'll get to your questions when we come back. As I was saying before the break, my wife and I were trying to just watch a video in our room. We have an ancient TV. We have a VCR hooked up to it. And it was a pretty good one. I think it was a Samsung or something. And it had always worked really well. And I just tried to put a video in. Push the button. Nothing. It started to churn like it was going to kick out the little tray, but it never did. And so I became more and more frustrated. I went and got a knife so that I could sort of, you know how in the old days with like the Apples, you could push a paper clip in and it would force eject whatever disc would not come out. It was a manual backup. It was smart. Well, there was no manual backup for this VCR. And I kept trying to prod it and poke it and see if I just sort of pried it out and, take the tip of the knife and just force it to just pop out while pushing the button and making it go. It never came out, ever. I banged on it. I did all kinds of things. And eventually I broke the thing, but it was already broken. I mean, it wasn't going to work. And so we took it out. and reconnected all the wires. And, and that's when we discovered it's not a new invention to us. It was not as if we didn't know about it. But the way we had our VCR hooked up, we could never utilize it. We have cable. We have the really cheap package, but and by the way, kudos to Charter because they do a great job. Anyway, we were able to watch movies on the TV. We thought they didn't work on that ancient television. We have one of those really old ones that's not a flat screen. But it works. So we're going to keep it. Anyway, we watched a couple of movies on their pay-per-view. They had free movies. Now, admittedly, they were not the movies we wanted to watch because, of course, the kids are downstairs and we were happy to give them the living room and the fireplace and let them have fun on a Friday night. But we were able to enjoy seeing something different, all thanks to technology that is new, that has been developed by younger people who are doing things differently. And I think one of the things we have to figure out how to do is get that to match, be able to reach this same demographic, this youthful demographic, this new generation in terms of politics. And that means you got to speak a new language. It means you have to communicate a different way. My long road to an actual point here is very simple. We can get upset about the left stream media. We can get upset about the bias, whether it's Fox News' bias or CNN's bias or all of them. Every one of them has an agenda of some sort. Every one of them wants to sell soap and doesn't care about the truth. But a young woman in Colorado happens to be conservative, happens to be a veteran who served this country. She figured out a way to say what was on her mind. She got over the fear. So many people are terrified of saying anything on social media because they could be criticized. And I get it. I say stuff all the time. And I watch my friend counter go down from 5,000 to something less. It's like, hey, okay, so I lost some friends today. Oh, well. If you can't handle what I believe and the fact that I will speak the truth and I will defend it and I will speak my opinion. And, if you can't deal with somebody's opinion, you have to unfriend them. That's your deal. That's your problem. For me, I have no problem if people disagree with my opinion. Now, if they want to disagree with me in a public venue, that becomes a different issue. But if they choose to bring it to me privately, no problem. We'll have a conversation. I'm not threatened by people who disagree with me. As a matter of fact, I welcome it. I give out the number all the time, 323-746-TALK, if you want to call in and disagree, as is your right. You are welcome to do so. We will bring you on air, and it doesn't mean that we have to be disagreeable. That's really up to the individual. Some people can disagree in an agreeable manner, and other people just turn into complete jackasses. They can't control themselves. And I have no control over that. I worry about the things I can control. And it's funny because after we took out the VCR, it was a whole new world. It was as if we were set free. We were no longer tied to the old way of doing things, the old way of thinking about things. And it's somewhat liberating. We've been talking about this amazing video that this young woman, Emily Longworth, has posted up on her Facebook. 8.25 million views by frustrated Americans who feel they have absolutely no voice, that nobody is speaking for them. And I, for one, am proud to hear someone from the next generation who is constantly being underestimated, being attacked and vilified and demonized and called all kinds of names. But this always happens. I'm sure my generation was called lazy, shiftless, slackers, whatever. And every generation since, I always hear older people say that about the younger generation. But you know what? This young woman figured out how to do something that nobody in politics had figured out how to do. She had figured out how to put into words in 5 minutes, literally a short 5-minute video, which I would love to play for you again because I think it is so worth it. If you missed it, if you were tuned out, or if you're just tuning in, maybe you will prefer to hear this instead of the sounds of silence. I don't know if we have it queued up and we can play it again, but I would love to just let you listen to a young woman from a generation that everybody has given up on, in her own words, talking about what will happen. She's warning ISIS. Come to America at your own peril.
Dear ISIL, I wanted to be one of the first to congratulate you on your graduation from the level of scum to the peak of pusillanimous maggots. I must say, personally, I am impressed at how quickly you progressed to that stage, but not in the least bit surprised that you finally did make it. You have most certainly turned all of the heads that you have not sawed off and managed to grasp the attention of the world. And to think, you only had to slaughter roughly 10,000 innocent men, women, and children to do so. For the last 2 years, I have sat in the comfort of my home watching your power-hungry posse of misfits terrorize the world, all while listening to your vitriolic diatribe and farcical sense of reasoning for annihilating those whom you call disbelievers in the name of Allah. It is my understanding, after having educated myself on the foundation of your brutality and the origin of your beliefs, that you will stop at nothing until you accomplish everything. Everything being what your God says is everything, not you. You were once quoted by saying, "We fear not the swarms of planes, nor ballistic missiles, nor drones, nor satellites, nor battleships, nor weapons of mass destruction. How could we fear them, while Allah the Exalted has said, if Allah should aid you, no one can overcome you." And just like that, you consider yourselves invincible. Isn't it fascinating how religion works? We, being those who participate in the idea of believing in an intangible entity, become the judge, jury, and executioner to those who do not believe as we do, all in the name of that very being. I'm a bit ambivalent to this concept, as I am a Christian and do not condone your tactics at praising your God, but it was not too long ago that Christians did the very same thing in the name of ours. So this, coupled with your sadistic slaying of thousands, is why you have graduated to a level worthy of the attention you have received by those whom you wish to destroy. Some call it a war on terrorism, others a war on religion, some even call it a war on power and politics. Americans, however, those of us who do not follow blindly and do not fall to our knees in the wake of fear and Islamic extremism, call this a war on life. And if there's one thing I know about my country, it's that her people do not take kindly to those attempting to end it. You see, we have a set of values in this country: pride, honor, integrity. And for years now, we have allowed our leaders to define those values and dictate when we use them and how. I'm sure it will come as no surprise to you that those same leaders are now the individuals who have polished and defined America's bark, but have yet to brush the dust back off her bite. They have sat idly by, twiddling their thumbs and tightening the chains around the necks of my countrymen when they snarl at the taste of Islamic blood. They have implemented rules of engagement so as to spare the destruction and annihilation of those whom you stand aside. They have coddled our enemies and nurtured their foundation, all while telling my people to stand down and remain silent. And for this reason, my country is ready to release the chains of moral ambiguity that have suppressed our ability to defend our nation against all enemies sworn to destroy her. The President of the United States no longer possesses the ability to speak on behalf of the American people. He has turned his back on us, and as a result, we have turned our fronts to you. So if you want something, you have to come through us to get it. I implore you to reconsider your next move, though, because once you activate on American soil, you will be coming head-to-head and toe-to-toe with the beast that will redefine your definition of Judgment Day. And the last thing you will see before your 72 virgins is the face of an American that validated your one-way ticket to the show. Make no mistake about it, America does not fear ISIL. We have been waiting for the opportunity that you have presented at our feet like the gullible little puppies that you are, biting the ankles of someone much bigger than they. You prey on those that do not stand a chance against you. You hide behind your masks and stand behind those you execute like sheepish cowards, beating your chest and chanting death to America. You are not invincible to this nation's thirst for blood of our enemies just because your God says you are. You are not indestructible from the shrapnel of our honor and liberty just because your God says you are. You are not impenetrable to the blade of our country's sword just because your God says that you are. You will need a lot more than his words to protect you from a war on American soil, because when it comes to life or death in these United States, we don't play by the rules of the government. The United States of America will not bow to radical Islam, and we will not be backed into a corner by the hands of our enemy. Keep that in mind when you knock on our door, because you cannot possibly begin to fathom what is waiting for you on the other side. Quote for you from my father. ISIS members, every one of you is a pig-eating son of a whore. F*** you, your mother, your prophet, and that offspring of a pig you call Allah. Am I being too vague? End quote.
And there it is, in the voice of a young woman from Colorado. It has been seen 8.2 million times, and certainly that will increase greatly now that we've posted it up at timdonnellyshow.com, but it's up there. And you can view it, and you can agree, you can criticize, you can say whatever you want, but she has largely captured the attitude of America toward our enemies in a way that Barack Obama is completely incapable of. You have I don't know what her age is, but you have a woman who's probably in her 20s, who has served this country, who has made it clear, made it crystal clear, that the President of the United States no longer speaks for her and no longer speaks for most of us. Because he is a man of no action. He is a man of no courage. He is a man of no character. He does not imbue or embody American values. Whatever he is a mystery to the vast majority of Americans who are beginning to suspect that his sympathies clearly lie with the enemies, those who have declared jihad, holy war against innocent Americans, calling us the great Satan, innocent Westerners around the globe. And he is content to wage a sitkrieg, to do nothing, to stand there and pretend to do things. But in the end, he stands in the way as an obstacle to that which needs to be done. And that which needs to be done was laid out by someone from the old guard. In an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, Peggy Noonan said it so plainly. We don't need to understand. We don't need to analyze. We need to stop them. That's the only thing that matters, is we need to stop them. Well, I would disagree with her in one regard. We need to understand the nature of evil. We need to understand the true nature of our enemy in order to stop them. We also need to arm ourselves, not only with guns and ammunition, firearms, and the tools that Americans use to defend their lives, but we also need to arm ourselves with an attitude, an American attitude that is embodied in this video. So when you're feeling down, when you're feeling discouraged, when you feel like nothing is going right in this war against this ghost-like enemy, listen again to that video and take heart. 323-746-TALK. We'll be right back. Final segment here on the Tim Donnelly Show. If you've been listening, we've been having a great conversation about what it really means to be an American. Americans, we don't wait for someone to come save us. We're the people who have always been counted on to save the rest of the world. We don't wait. We prepare. And I can tell you that if ISIS rears its ugly head on American soil, as it has threatened, it won't be the government that comes after you. It will be the people. It won't be Obama. It will be Americans. And God help you, because Obama can't protect you from Americans who will dispatch you off to whatever la-la land you think there'll be 72 whores waiting for you. Not virgins, they'll be whores, because you are bankrupt and corrupt and evil. You don't represent anything. You claim to represent this faith called Islam. But there is no religion that is credible, that is true, that empowers people to murder other people for being unbelievers. If you look at every legitimate faith in the world, conscripts, believers, potential converts are persuaded. They don't have a gun put to their head. Everyone condemns the Crusades of the 14th century. That was not the way to go about bringing Christ to the heathens, to the unbeliever. See, God, a true God, pricks your conscience, brings you to awareness of his greatness and your need, and does it at different moments in our lives, which are undeniable. And we all react to him in different ways. But the bottom line is, there is no forced conversions. That's rape. You're raping the soul. And so, really, what this young woman is doing is she's rejecting a rapist. She's saying, we will not allow you to rape all these Americans, essentially by killing them because they don't adhere to your purest form of Islam. And I will tell you that every American I talk to now has serious questions about the true nature of Islam. What is the true purpose of this religion? We've had Daniel Greenfield on, we had Pamela Geller on last week, and if you missed that clip, you need to go to timdonnellyshow.com. We have it posted up there individually as a post. We also have it on our Facebook page. It is not a very long interview, but it is a very powerful commentary with someone who is an absolute expert on Islamic jihad. She has had death threats. ISIS has sworn to wipe her off the face of the earth. So far, they failed. Yes, she takes precautions. Yes, she has armed guards. But she hasn't backed down at all. She is on television everywhere and on radio, always in demand, because the vast majority of people do not understand the nature of the enemy that has declared war on us. And the enemy that has declared on war on us will never stop until we stop them. And to all of our brave men and women who have fought in this latest war, we are now getting a glimpse of what you were up against, and it makes us even more grateful for your service and your sacrifice, let me tell you. We often have a caller on this show from Wrightwood, Mike, who was there on the front lines and has paid a heavy price, is very knowledgeable, And you know what, Mike? I'm just deeply grateful for you and for your service and for all of those Americans like you who really faced this evil in an isolated world, because the media walked away and stopped really covering the war years ago. And you might have thought that Americans forgot you, and we didn't. And I think there's going to be a surge in awareness of how special we really have it as Americans. This whole idea that we can have religious freedom where we don't kill each other because we don't worship the same God the same way. As a matter of fact, we celebrate that. I was honored to observe Shabbat with some of my Jewish friends. I'd never done that before. I was honored to be asked. It was cool. I can't believe I'm out of time. Anyway, we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks to Chief Engineer Sean McNeil, all of our sponsors, and you. God bless you and Godspeed. Tim Donnelly Show out.